Now then, one of the main organizations that has come out of the BRICS as a bloc in its 10 years of existence is the New Development Bank. It's about 3 years old in its operations at the moment. It's got a loan portfolio of about 5.7 billion US dollars. At the moment, though, its operations are restricted to just the 5 member countries. So where does it go from here? Earlier on, I spoke to the bank's Vice President and CFO, Leslie Massdorp. I asked him exactly what we should expect with regard to NDB in Africa. So the African Regional Centre is operational now. What has it achieved so far?
So it's very important, Rama, to trace back a few steps. The bank is only 3 years old.
Yeah.
We still refer to the bank as a startup because 3 years is a very short time in the life of an institution.
Especially an international financial institution.
Right. So when we arrived in Shanghai, July first week of 2015, there was nothing. There were offices, but no staff, no systems, no technology. Literally from ground zero. So the bank started its operations, now have approved loans of over $5.7 billion, 23 projects in 5 different countries, got 130 staff, and rapidly growing. We opened the Africa Regional Centre August last year. So it's literally about 7-8 months old. So it's early stages. We're still capacitating the office in terms of systems, in terms of personnel. We've appointed the Director General or the head of the Africa Regional Centre. So we're operational to some extent. What have we achieved so far? We have deepened and broadened our pipeline. So now we've got a much stronger pipeline of projects that we can support in South Africa. So at this stage, as you might know, the bank is owned and controlled by the 5 countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. But all along, right from day one, the intention has been to create a global bank. And a global bank means which will have much broader membership than the 5 countries. But that is something for the leaders to decide on when will be the appropriate time in future to incorporate additional countries. At this stage, the Africa Regional Centre is mainly looking after South Africa, but we're hoping as well, to the extent possible, Rama, that we support projects, infrastructure projects, that can have regional economic benefits. For example, if you build a port, if you build power, rail lines, which across border, provided South Africa is involved, we can support those kinds of projects.
One of the things I remember hearing in yesterday's session was that the bank eventually wants to rebalance its portfolio. So you've got 70% lending to state entities, and governments, and 30% to the private sector. Where does that private sector element come in? And what sort of instruments are you deploying? Because vanilla loans, obviously, just not going to cut it.
That's exactly right. So one of the reasons why we started fundamentally with a sovereign loan book is because that provides you with the ability to get the highest possible credit rating. When you have all of your loans, when we started out with a sovereign guarantee, it means that the probability of default in that loan book is very, very low, which means you can get a higher credit rating, which in turn means you can raise money in the debt capital markets by issuing bonds much cheaper. You are more credit worthy if your portfolio is more solid. Right? But now that we have established the bank, we've got a little bit of a track record, we want to diversify and also lend to the private sector. There are a few reasons why we want to do that. Firstly, governments are fiscally constrained. As you know, all of our governments have their own macroeconomic challenges, and the private sector are now more able to take long-term risk in terms of infrastructure. The private sector today are building and rolling out fiber optics in terms of high-speed internet, building renewable energy, whether it's solar, offshore wind, all kinds of renewable energy projects. They're very active in many forms of infrastructure. We want to use our capital to act as a catalyst to mobilize additional funding. So the first reason why we're doing this is because we'll be able to crowd in more capital. Instead of us lending $5 billion as we have done now, we could lend $5 billion but crowd in an additional $3 or $4 billion from other providers, co-finance, for example.
That almost sounds like an approach where you're going to be taking on some of the risk as well, or at least some of the primary risk.
That is exactly what we intend to do. We want to take out some of that initial risk, which makes it difficult for private sector players to enter into these infrastructure projects. So we want to enhance the risk profile of those projects, and in that way make it possible for those private sector players who've got different risk return metrics and profiles that their shareholders are comfortable with. We're making it possible for them to participate.